Recently, my son's new favorite game to play is the quiet game. Not normally a favorite for a 6-year-old boy. He loves it. Not because he's good at it. He is most definitely not good at staying silent. But recently, I realized that I think he loves it because as we play, we focus intently on each other as we try to make the other one laugh or speak. When the quiet game begins, not only do our voices stop, but everything around us is put on hold and silenced. Though we have no verbal communication, we pay close attention to one another and deeply listen to each other. I don't think this is accidental. As Rabbi Craig Esring points out, if you scramble up the letters of the word listen, an anagram that appears is the word silent. This reminds us that to listen intently to another, we must first silence all that is within us and around us that distracts us from another's words. In Judaism, the importance of truly listening is taught over and over. Rabbi Leora Frankel believes this is because when we listen to another, their story becomes a part of our own, and we are inextricably linked. Listening attentively to another person also requires a sacrifice, a relinquishing of our own agenda and desired outcomes. It demands compassion, self-restraint, and simsum, a contraction of the space that we take up in the world, to make more room for someone else. The Torah teaches us again and again that we need to listen intently. In the book of Deuteronomy alone, the root shin mem ayin, which means to hear, or Shema, is said 92 times. Our central prayer, the Shema, which begins in last week's parasha and continues in this week's parasha, continually tells us we need to hear. The truth is, though, to hear is not really enough. The word Shema is not completely translatable into English. In fact, there's no English word that has as many meanings as this one special word. Shema can mean listen, pay attention, hear, obey, know, understand, and many other things. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explains that in English, virtually all our words for understanding or intellect are governed by the metaphor of sight. We speak of insight, hindsight, foresight, vision. We speak of people being perceptive, of making an observation, of adopting a perspective. We say, it appears that, and when we understand something, we say, I see. This entire linguistic constellation is the legacy of the philosophers of ancient Greece, the supreme example in all history of a visual culture. Judaism, by contrast, is a culture of the ear more than the eye. As Rabbi David Kahn, a disciple of Rav Kook, pointed out in his book, Kol HaNevuah, our book of law, the Talmud, consistently uses the metaphor of hearing. So when a proof is brought, it says, Tashma, come and hear. When it speaks of inference, it says, Shema mina, hear from this. When someone disagrees with an argument, it says, Lo shuma le, he could not hear it. When it draws a conclusion, it says, Mashma, from this it can be heard. Maimonides calls the oral tradition Pi Hashemua, from the mouth of that which was heard. In Western culture, understanding comes from seeing. But in Judaism, it comes from listening. So how do we sharpen our listening skills? This is the question. We don't want to be the person that doesn't hear our children or our loved ones. We don't want to be the person in the echo chamber only reinforcing our views and never being challenged by contradictory viewpoints. We need to hear the other side, not only politically, but socially. We need to be able to hear those we love dearly and those whom we admittedly disagree with. This past week, my family stayed in my father's home for a visit. He and his wife have very different political opinions than Matt and I do, and we often discuss how we see the world differently. This week, though, I noticed that they do something really impressive. While watching the news, they make sure to flip back and forth between Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. They shared with me this is because they realized that the same story can be told in dramatically different ways by different media outlets. And they've made the decision that they not only want to hear the perspective that they're most comfortable with, but they want to continually hear and understand the other perspectives being shared in our nation. Now, this is an act of listening. Their efforts transform the act of hearing the news into one of trying to truly understand our world. Rabbi Shana Goldstein teaches us that many of us have been blessed with the ability to hear, but few of us have taken time to refine the art of listening. Often, as soon as someone else begins to speak, we begin preparing a response. We're not listening to understand, just to reply. Hardly 10 words escape their mouths, and our rebuttal is in our minds, if not already on our lips. Sometimes we're preoccupied with other ideas or worries and are unable to set them aside to pay full attention with our ears and our minds. Other times we hold preconceived notions about the speaker or the subject and tune out, hearing the words without listening to the message. And sometimes we are simply self-centered, focused only on what we want to say rather than what needs to be heard. We hear what we want to hear instead of what is intended. Our tradition asks for more, though. It demands we truly listen so that we may understand. As we get closer to the month of Elul, which traditionally we engage in deep spiritual prep work for the upcoming days of awe, we inch closer to Rosh Hashanah and the commandment to hear the sound of the shofar. This is a very specific commandment, and it takes great concentration and intent. And in the Mishnah, we're taught that if one has heard the sound of the shofar, the obligation has been fulfilled. But if it's the sound of the echo that has been heard, the obligation has not been fulfilled. This teaching reminds us that we need to work hard to drown out the echoes all around us, especially the social media echo chambers that reverberate in our lives. We need to work hard to listen intently to others, to their real words. This week, as we hear, if you indeed obey, hear my commandment with which I charge you today to love Adonai, your God, and serve God with all your heart and with all your soul, we may hear the Torah begging us to open our ears and listen. Really, really listen to all that we're being asked to do. Yet it takes real courage to listen to those around us. It takes patience because oftentimes we hear hard things. If you listen, you hear people who are suffering. You hear people who are potentially upset. You hear people who fundamentally disagree with you. So if you find the act of listening or understanding to be too difficult, I recommend taking a lesson from the quiet game. Try silencing yourself, your judgment, and your distractions. Focus on the other. Let their story become part of your own. Seek to understand and to learn. As we ease into the month of Elul, preparing us for our pre-High Holy Day reflections, may we all work to open our ears and listen to those around us. Listening is the greatest gift we can give, not only to others, but also to ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.